If you'd called an Aussie an unimaginative, lazy dumbass, they'd probably smack you in the head. But if instead you said that Australia was the lucky country, they'd probably say, good on you, mate, not realising that you just called them a lazy, unimaginative dumbass. You see, through pure ignorance, most Aussies don't even know that the term the lucky country is a backhander from some bloke called Donald Horne, who wrote, Australia is a lucky country run by second-rate people who share in its luck. He reckoned that while other industrialised nations create wealth through innovation, Aussies just sit on their fat asses living off their large reserves of natural resources and show less enterprise than a Channel 10 programming director. So why do Aussies think that the lucky country is a term of endearment? Well, it's got the word lucky in it, and lucky's a good word, isn't it? Dumbasses. Australia recently had the chance to be innovative as they elected a government that was going to be amongst the first in the world to implement an emissions trading scheme. But due to a hung parliament, they were forced to introduce a carbon tax instead. But unfortunately, during some obscure interview just before the election, the prospective Prime Minister said that if elected, they wouldn't introduce a carbon tax. And when this interview was uncovered several months later, it was leapt upon by the Conservatives, who labelled the Prime Minister a liar, which still embarrasses me as far too many Australians actually fell for this obvious red herring, and somehow it really resonated around the country. Now, even though most Australians seem to accept that politicians lie, the problem was that it should have been obvious to even the most stupid of Australians that this more than likely wasn't a lie. To be a lie, there has to be some form of intended deception, but the Gillard government had no intentions of introducing a carbon tax, but nor did they have the psychic ability to predict a hung parliament where they'd be forced, due to a deal with a minor party, to introduce a carbon tax. And as their platform on climate change was an actual contributing factor to them being elected, that concession would have to be more in line with that platform than doing nothing at all. But even if, for the sake of argument, the Prime Minister had harboured some devious plan to introduce a carbon tax, what actual difference would it have made? As you have to ask, how many Australians actually saw the interview? How many Australians who saw the interview had their vote hinged on whether there be an emissions trading scheme or a carbon tax? How many Australians actually know the difference between an emissions trading scheme and a carbon tax? I'm not even sure, but I don't really care because I'm not one of the many who are naive enough to believe that we can actually make any difference to climate change. There's no way the world could coordinate in time to make any real difference, but that's not the point. This was our chance to prove that we could be a smart country by becoming world leaders in the development of renewable technologies, inspired by the world's number one motivator, money. If faced with the certainty of a permanent, ever-increasing price on carbon, there is no doubt Australians would have been smart enough to come up with cheaper alternatives, and some already have, but have since been forced to take their businesses overseas to be taken seriously. Now, all this, and pretty much every other problem we have here in Australia, stems from our ridiculously childish views on politics and more so politicians. I mean, look at us. Michael Clarke, the leader of our national cricket team, earns $5.5 million a year. No one bats an eyelid. But when they hear the Prime Minister, the leader of our country, earns less than 1/10 of that, for some bizarre reason we're outraged. Where the hell are our priorities? We're prepared to pay our sporting stars and celebrities obscene amounts of money, but expect our leaders, the people whose decisions actually affect our lives, to work for comparative peanuts, then get confused to why we end up with the third-party agenda-driven dumbasses we have today. Yep, we truly are the lucky country.